in this wrap-up, we'll be bringing to your attention some of the main points that have arisen during the keynotes and the practical sessions. And for ease and to keep the conversation dynamic, we will be asking questions to the panelists in a series of questions. So as a reminder, you can use the chat as a participant to say hello, who you are and where you're from. And you can also enable captions if you would like to. Simply click on the button that says captions at the bottom of your screen. I will now hand over to Stéphane to kickstart the conversation.
Thank you, Anaïs. So my first question would be for Hilary. You reminded us of the importance of leading with purpose during your keynote session. And I noted that there were other words starting with the letter P: people, plan, power. What about passion? Where would you put that? Is passion about the what and purpose about the why?
Okay, thank you. Right, so I was on the letter P, so I'll stick with it. I think passion is completely critical. I think passion is actually a mixture of the what and the why. I think it's the what in terms of what are you passionate about, and the why in terms of why does it matter to you. And I think those two things kind of wrap around the passion. But I think it is important because when you are traveling through the various kind of stages of creative development, you often encounter some challenges, some roadblocks, some difficulties. Many people tell you no, and you then have to really decide how important is this to me. And that's where passion kicks in. So when you're not getting a straightforward answer and you really do want to go ahead, that's where your passion is. And if you're really passionate about something, that's helpful in getting you to go around a different situation or above or underneath and just find other ways. If you're not passionate about it, then you'll just say, okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary. I had a question for Vicky. We haven't really talked much about outdoor audiences. And from some of the research that has been carried out in the UK, we know that outdoor arts audiences are a lot more representative than of the wider population than in many other sectors and art forms. So how important do you think it is for festivals and venues to be representative in their programming in reaching a more diverse audience?
I think that representation is hugely important. You know, anecdotally, I've heard lots of stories from other practitioners about how having visibly people that represent their identities in performances, whether it's on stage, in music, on the streets, has changed their perspective on whether that space was for them or not. I think that representation is really important, but it's not where we have to end. We need to think about how representative our organisations and our systems of production are, because that prevents us from having a situation where that representation is sometimes an afterthought or something that's bounded around particular presentations in a way that's not the same as the rest of the program. You know, I remember when my company was started out and our phone would ring off the hook during Black History Month, but the rest of the year, not a lot of approaches. So the representation, as I said, on stage is important, but it needs to bleed into the organisation and how that functions and the systems and processes that you have so that the leadership shift happens. I also think that there's a danger that people think that that representation is their audience development work, and it really isn't. The idea that you book a company and they will bring the audience is something that I've heard repeated, you know, quite a lot, and that's not the case. The artist is there to present the work. Your job is to do the audience development. And of course, you know, having representation helps bring in a broader audience, but it's not, again, the end of the work.
Vicky.
This is a question for any of you speaker, so you can pick it up at later. You're all based in the UK, but you have professional ties internationally as well. Do you think the way leadership, inclusion, and advocacy are approached differently in the UK? And if so, why? Anyone?
I suspect I'll say something here. Certainly about the context in the UK. I mean, we have a relatively open democracy where we can have conversations about things that we don't like in social, cultural, and economic policy. So, advocacy and lobbying and activism are visible and are day to day and take place. And the climate is, to varying degrees, receptive here. Perhaps in other countries might be slightly less so in certain for certain sectors and for certain messages. So approaching advocacy is something everybody's expected to do. However, questions about inclusion perhaps relate a lot to the way that kind of cultural policy is underpinned in the UK, particularly heavily by social and economic instrumental outcomes, which I know is something that in the UK has been, was introduced in the new, kind of came to the fore strongly in the New Labour era. Existed before that, but came to the fore strongly, and it was something the New Labour government really, really maximised. So, the way kind of inclusion is approached is certainly informed by that kind of way of understanding the role of art and culture. The way that, it's on record that, the UK kind of population and the Treasury were very receptive to more investment in art and culture during the New Labour years. There was significant increases in arts and cultural investment. But it was on the basis that there would be these social and economic impacts, and a lot of the bigger programs were tied to those things. So, so I do think partly inclusion is informed by some of that different social and policy context in the UK, and the way we do advocacy is too. I don't know about how leadership's different. Maybe Hilary and Vicky would.
Or Bettina, who wants to read. Thank you, Michael. Bettina, do you want?
The leadership, I think it is different because it all exists in their own culture. So there's something about language that makes it easier in English, where you can be the formal you and the informal you. In French and more Catholic cultures, actually, there is a stronger hierarchy, a stricter hierarchy. In German as well, with duzen and siezen, vous et toi, and these things are all influential on these hierarchies. So I think in the UK, language makes a certain fluidity possible, where it's another step in different countries and different languages. Or, for example, the Baltic countries where leadership, it's not a surprise to have the director of a company cycle to work. In different cultures, that would be completely no-no, because they need to see the boss with status. And that will all be deeply rooted in the local culture. So I think it is a slightly different picture. And I do think in the UK, there is more fluidity. It doesn't mean, I think there are other issues to do with class, which I have not encountered that much in Germany, where I've spent half my life. So I think there are local situations, which are part of the system that we operate in.
I agree. I think there are local situations, and that's informed by cultural norms and what we accept as good, or come to accept as good in terms of cultural norms. But I think it's also interesting, if you look across the world with globalization and people mirroring each other, isn't it interesting if you look at some of the examples of leadership that are being replicated in Latin America, in Southeast Asia, in the US, in the UK, you can see parallels there in terms of leadership styles And I find it fascinating that even over above the cultural norms, we seem to be moving in one direction at this stage in time, or, you know, many countries. And I just wonder whether that is through globalization and influencing and cross-referencing. So I think transference does happen as well.
Thank you, Hilary and Bettina and Michael, for answering this question.
Well, just for context, I was going to ask a question for Bettina. Bettina led a practical session on developing listening skills to a dozen people back on a Wednesday. And so I noticed something that you said in practical session, which was, in leadership, emotional intelligence is more important than IQ. And I really like that sentence. So my question to you is, could you tell us a story of your own experience or somebody else's where emotional intelligence made a true difference?
Yeah, I think it makes a true difference every single day, probably every single hour of everybody's day. The example I've got in my head is something quite practical. And I chose it because I hope that it finds different applications. So it's not my story, it's my colleagues who was looking after a community choir for an outdoor project which had a group of professional artists involved as well. And she set up the green room, which was a village hall for them separately, thinking that is their space and they can be amongst themselves. There were lovely biscuits there, tea and coffee. She thought she'd had everything there that they needed, thinking of the hierarchy of needs that I mentioned also. And she went in and she realized there was tension when she asked them how they were. It was a little bit somber. There was no enthusiasm. This was, you know, just 2 hours before the big show. And she thought, no, something's wrong here. She realized something was wrong. They were not their usual selves. They were not enthusiastic. They were not excited. And she thought, well, they've got their biscuits. What else could they want? And she then realized that they were separate from the professional artists. And that meant they felt sidelined. They felt like second-class citizens. They weren't as important. And then all it took was a very quick turnaround, create a space with the other artists where everybody and the musicians, everybody together. And yes, the biscuits, they stayed in that room, but it wasn't about the biscuits. It was about feeling that they belonged to the big project. They were all equal in that time. And to have recognized that sometimes it's not the obvious thing, it's not the thing, it's not necessarily the comfort. Sometimes there are other needs that are at play, and it's worth investigating what they might be in order to get the best out of these people.
Thank you, Bettina.
Before I ask a question to Vicky, of course, to all the speakers, if you want to reply to any of the other questions, it's possible. So jump in whenever you feel like it, okay? Because I know this feels a little bit artificial, but we had to find a format so we could get all your insights up until the end. I have a question for Vicky that came up during your session from a participant, and we weren't able to answer it. And it's about the associate director program you run or used to run. And they wanted to know how you supported artists within that.
Yeah, so we had an associate artist. We've had a lot of different programs to support and develop the artists that we worked with. And I think the thing about the way the programs have developed is that it's been an evolution. So every time we have run a program, we've stopped, we've looked at what was successful about it, what was less successful about it, what the needs of either those individuals that we've worked with or the wider sector are, and then decided what we do next. So we had an associate director program that was about bringing in one artist to work in parallel with me for an extended period of time that was paid. It was necessary that it was paid because you can't ask people to give their energy and their creativity to you for nothing. And it was really focused on people who weren't in the circus sector to come into the circus sector and kind of grow into that space. As we were running that program, we found actually what we really needed to do was to do something different than that, that it needed to be a space for multiple people. So we evolved that program into an associate artist program where we found artists that we wanted to work with on our project that were all paid, but found ways in which we could support them in their own personal priorities alongside them working with us in our organisation. And it's a little bit of a looser relationship, it's less formal, but the understanding of a mutual commitment is present.
Thank you, Vicky.
And so I had a question from Michael. This is a question that came through one of the participants towards the end of your keynotes, but unfortunately we didn't have time to address it, but that person was in your practical session, so it's already be semi-addressed in a more informal way. But I just want to repeat it as I thought it was quite an interesting one. So the noise across the internet can seem unsurmountable, and the constant pushing of our messages to your family of supporters to get out there often makes it like a broken record, lost in a forest of broken records. How can you keep it fresh?
Question.
Mike, you're muted.
That's a great question. And, you know, sort of, we do need to be careful about how much we put on the shoulders of our supporters and our friends and our kind of patrons and those who, and our champions. But I wonder whether there's a couple of things here, really. I'm probably going to take inspiration from something Vicky said in the practical session too, which was something about flipping the message away from crisis and towards, you know, celebration and a kind of unity of message. Because I get the sense that some of the kind of Save the Arts style campaigns kind of can potentially be a bit of a turn-off, and actually they kind of present a picture of negativity. And I kind of like the idea of, you know, actually a celebration of what outdoor arts has achieved and could achieve, you know, and I wonder whether playing some of that to our family of supporters might inspire them in a new way. We talked a lot in our breakout session about the potential of outdoor arts, which feels potentially a little bit different from the potential of the broader arts sector in this moment, because we can do it, you know, we can socially distance and do this work in outdoor spaces. So I wonder whether there's something about emphasizing that and emphasizing the role that outdoor arts could play in post-COVID reconstruction, both economic, social and cultural. People's opportunity to celebrate, unify, come together, gather, something outdoor arts can achieve. And I wonder whether taking that kind of approach with our family of supporters, rather than a kind of, I'm reading into it, I don't know whether the person who asked the question was saying it's kind of pushing out a message about, you know, we're in trouble, we're in crisis, you've got to help us. Kind of asking, what is it that we can, how can we, you know, you become involved in this kind of a reimagining of what outdoor arts could achieve, in a reimagining of what society and culture could be like as we recover and as we go into recovery phases. So that would be my thoughts about that. Obviously, you know, I would want to look at what that organisation was doing. If it is kind of pumping out stuff and it's not working, I'd want to kind of look at the context of that and so on. But those are my immediate thoughts.
Thank you, Michael. There is a question that has been asked a couple of minutes ago by Lucy Medlicott from ISACS in the question and answer box, and I'd like to take it and twist it a little bit. There is a word in French called démocrature that was invented by a French writer called Alain Damasio, who's a writer of sci-fi novels, very important in France right now. The word démocrature is a composed word from democracy, and dictature. So it would be, if I would have to translate it in English, it would be democracy, which sums up a little bit what Lucy is trying to say. How do you feel about this, about the tendency in today's society, especially in the Western part of the world, because we're all talking about this right now, about the relationship between a real democracy or a not real democracy? Anyone who want to pick it?
I can start on that one. It's quite a knotty question. I think so. Rather than answer, I will just try and explore it if that's allowed. I think that the issue of real democracy and kind of overt democracy is partly what challenges us. Because if you have real democracy, you might not like the answers. But sometimes our democracy is stacked in order to give a set answer. It's where we stack it in order to achieve the set results, and we will move the boundaries of who can vote and why and what the issues are. We will play with the questions. We will do all sorts of things to try to get the results that we want, rather than really handling democracy, of saying, okay, each person has a vote and they can genuinely respond as they would like. Because when you have real democracy, it's messy. And we don't genuinely like to deal with mess. And democracy is slow, and we want things to happen quickly. And I think that that's why we're sort of entangled in democracy or democrature, because we want quick answers and we want tidy answers, and democracy doesn't always give us that.
Thank you, Hilary. Bettina, your mic, if you want to.
I'm just wondering out loud what another more comfortable word might be. In a different thing around social communism or something like that, whether there's something that ticks all those boxes. And yes, the messiness and our need for certainty, it's all difficult, isn't it? And trust is somehow at the heart of all of that. Yeah, I think it's a great one to explore.
I agree. I think that question of trust and that ability for people to see their impact on the system actually is the thing that is most challenging for us right now. I grew up in Southeast London, and during the whole Brexit, yes, I said that word, situation, I was talking to a lot of the friends that I went to school and primary school with who had no intention of voting because they felt it would make no difference to the outcome. So they're already convinced that they have no impact on the system. And then I reflect on what's going on with Black Lives Matter and how they organise themselves as a democratic organisation, that there isn't a single leader of Black Lives Matter. They have a purpose that all of the cells are committed to, and each cell, understanding that purpose and understanding the values that inform that purpose, organise themselves in whatever way they want to in order to achieve that purpose. And it's really interesting to see the difference in activation in that kind of system versus a system where you feel that you're at the bottom of the pile and that you have no influence on what happens at the top.
Thank you, Vicky.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add something just because it occurred to me across what Hilary and Bettina and Vicky said. It's just, what's the role of arts and culture in a functioning democracy? And what role does it play today? What role could it play if we really invested in it? Is it a frightening thing for those in power if you've got kind of people, because art and culture has the potential to radicalize, doesn't it? But if we invested more, if we were, more focused on, inclusion and engagement, genuine practices of engagement, I'm always curious to know what that kind of society could look like and the role that art and culture could play. And when there's big shifts in how art and culture is delivered and funded, I worry about what that means, you know, what that change, what's changing, and what the impact on that will be for the role art and culture can play in, you know, a functioning democracy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Such an interesting topic, and so French, I must say. We're talking about uncertainty, and one question that I had for Bettina is, could you give us some tips as to how we could stay centered with all this on the uncertainty and with our tendency to kind of always feel like we need to multitask?
About that. So first, the recognition that we are all animals. So our brains have been developed to keep us safe. They've been developed for survival. And our need for certainty is quite strong. And we're very good at negative forecasting. So all this situation is very, very challenging for us. However, all the people here, we deal in uncertainty all the time. You've all chosen this as your career path. Uncertainty is what you are experts at. So embrace that. Remind yourself that you are at the forefront, because as creative people, you are able to embrace uncertainty because you always have. But in more practical terms, what can you do to center yourself? I think be your own witness. Just be aware of what's going on with you every moment, every day. And ask yourself and do a body scan of whatever you need. What is going on with me today? And articulate it. Maybe write it down. Ask yourself, where am I feeling it? It's very likely to have a physical representation in your body. Ask yourself, has it got a shape or a form? Do a to-do list with only 3 things on there. And then do a list of 3 things that bring you joy. And multitasking, I think, is overrated. So I would urge you to do at least one thing properly and take pride in that. Really enjoy. And if it is just washing your hands, it can be banal, but just know that you have done that thing really well. And when you do get anxious and the fear envelops you, just think of the things that bring you joy, ease, and lightness, and pursue those with passion. Make that your task. Make that your project. There's no point in staring at the computer for 2 hours and not getting anywhere. Stop it right there. Just to recognize it and say, today, I'm not going to produce any good work. So what else can I do that will at least give me pleasure or joy? And do that with passion. Work out what your medicine is. What is your medicine? What are the things that make you feel better? Is it music? Is it dancing? Is it shouting? Is it going for a run? You work out what is in that medicine bottle. And make sure a friend of yours is in that medicine bottle as well. Arrange with a friend that there was somebody that you can call to say, okay, I just need you to listen today. Can you do that for me for 20 minutes? And especially if you're working by yourself, if you're working on your own by yourself and you're living on your own, just make sure you have one person that you can call and say, today is not going so well. Can I tell you about it? And be a very good listener for the other friend that you are there for. And that could be the one thing that you do really well on that day. And if you haven't got either of those friends, call me, honestly. I'd be only delighted to be a friend and a good listener.
I think you're going to get a lot of calls there, Bettina. Hilary.
I just wanted to really echo what Bettina said, you know, finding the things that bring you joy and really knowing that you can use those as a release. It's really very important. And I completely agree. I have a couple of friends who know that when I call and I forget to even say hello, I just go, well, it's not about them giving me an answer, or it's just about them being the space where I can just go, this is what's troubling me now. And very often just the interchange is enough. I actually can probably work out the answers. I just need to release the pent up energy. So those kind of good friends are really important. And yeah, trying to be there for other people in that same way. When you get those kind of mutual listening sort of friendships, it can take so much of the pain out. So yeah, I'm with you 100% on that, Bettina.
Thank you, Bettina.
There are a lot of people
Thank you,
clapping
Hilary.
on the chat as well.
Yeah, I think you're
I
going
just
to
wanted
receive
to
80 calls tonight.
I just wanted to note about the Manchester weather as well. It seems like it's trying to have an effect on this event as well by just like coming and going with the sunshine and the rain. So you might notice the background changing a bit. And Manchester will always fight back.
Hilary, I have another question for you. Following my initial patterns with letter P's, you talked also about perseverance and persistence. How does it translate in your daily practice?
Okay. I think perseverance, in order to try to find the energy to persevere, I think it's important to reflect. So when something doesn't quite go the way that you had wanted it to, or ideally, I think sometimes if you step back a bit and just reflect on what happened there, what happened, where was I, where was the other person, what else could I have done? Because if you can then sort of dissect it a little bit, you can then find, okay, so perhaps that I might do differently, which then can give you the energy and the momentum to try again, and rather than just repeat the same issue, to perhaps just inflect a little differently, or to try a different way around. But it enables you to persevere because you still have that same objective that you're working towards, but you're not just finding one way to come at it. You can step back, realize what wasn't working, and perhaps come another way. So for me, reflection is a really important part of being able to be persistent and to persevere. It means also being able to negotiate and to really listen. So it's tough if you're just hearing your own voice. Sometimes when people tell you no, there's a goodness in there. If they would have the trouble to explain to you why they don't agree, or why they don't want you to do it, etc., etc. And if you can put your listening antennae in and sort of sit in their shoes and say, well, why are they not liking this? Why are they not doing this? Then again, it gives you the room to just kind of blend what you're doing and thinking about different ways to do it. That way I find you don't have to give up your objective, but you do have to be prepared to work at it from different angles. And in that space between reflection and listening and negotiating and being open is where you can then find persistence. And it just doesn't, it moves away from kind of arrogance and bullishness into being more in for the long term, but not rigid. And that's where I like to view persistence.
Thank you.
So I had a little bit more of a question to you all, really. So whoever wants to answer first, you're welcome to. Can you tell us about that one person that might have inspired you in your career or in your personal life, and why? What sort of qualities that person have and that you admire? Michael?
I can say something there. There's a person, I'm not going to say who it is, I hope you're not expecting me to say it is. They might even be listening today. it's actually the person who helped me kind of leap across from one kind of career to another. Someone who works in the arts, it was actually at the Arts Council and now runs a venue. But she was absolutely fantastic. I had a kind of secondment to work with an organisation, and my organisation wouldn't let me go. And she said, look, do you know what? There's loads of opportunities here. It's going to work. Just take a leap. Come on a short-term contract, and you know, you will. You know, I'm sure you'll succeed. Just take a jump. So it was a woman who basically said, you know, take a chance, and held out her hand really across a you know, a divide, or across a kind of a crack in the earth. And it's someone I kind of still work with today regularly, really. But yeah, it was someone who's just, yeah, it was a kind of helping hand to take a leap, really.
Bettina?
So I think it's an interesting question, because I think there's probably loads of people along the way who have inspired me, and I've taken little bits of it along the way. I was thinking the common thread is probably the people who've shown their own vulnerability and appreciations of other people's skills and karma. So I think those are the things that always chime with me, that I think, oh, I want to be like that. If I had to name one person, I think it would have to be Tom Andrews, the founder of People United, who has just taken kindness as his value to pursue, and his recognition that being kind is still, and it is so sad, but it still is quite radical as a concept. But I think kindness is like a virus, because the moment you start giving it to others, they will take it on and they will pass it on. And so for me, that is a daily inspiration.
Thank you, Bettina. Vicky, you want to say?
Yeah, no, I don't want to name names either, because I know the person I'm thinking of would be embarrassed, but it is somebody who works in outdoor art, somebody who's completely different from me, white middle-aged man, who actually from very early on in my career always challenged me to be better than I thought I could be. And you know, there was a lot of kindness in that relationship, but also a lot of kind of honesty and a demand for growth and improvement, which I didn't always have the confidence to see was present within me. So yeah, that's all I've got to say. I'm going to get emotional if I talk about it anymore.
I think there are lots of similarities with what the other panelists have said, in that you can find so many good examples when you move through your career and things that resonate with you. But I think of one of the earliest ones for me when I was just in my late teens, was someone who we would now call a mentor, but at that time we weren't using the term in such a formal way. It was just someone who was looking out for me, as it were. And I remember he asked me, what do I want to be? It was a very simple question, but I knew he meant it. I knew he wasn't just kind of faffing. He was really looking me in the eye and asking me to tell him what I wanted to be. And it just felt so profound to have someone really take me seriously as a young person and genuinely want to have a discussion with me about where was I headed, and help me to think through what was the path to get there, which of course he then went on to do. But I just always remember that moment of treating someone, because he was much, much older than me, but treating them with the respect and saying, what do you want to be, and taking their opinion seriously. And that's something that I think we can do much, much more of, just in terms of passing that baton. So that's had a fantastic impact on me over a number of years.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I have a question for Michael. The COVID-19 crisis has created a paradoxical situation where culture and creativity have never felt so important, but at the same time, many professionals working in the live art sector are portrayed as non-essential workers, with venues closed, festival cancelled. So what kind of useful things or tips you could share with us to have an impact on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and something I was thinking about early on in this crisis. I think I heard a theatre director on the radio talking about this, and there was a bit of uncertainty about what the role of our sector should be and could be. Are we allowed to say anything? Are we allowed to speak up and say we're important? Are we allowed to raise the volume? Is it dangerous to do so? Will we get shouted down? You're not important right now. And it's something I've thought about, been musing a lot. I wouldn't say I've thought about it in a great deal of depth, but my response would be about people equipping themselves with particularly the economic value, but also the social and cultural value of arts and culture. You know, we've got a lot, we're overloaded with statistics in the UK about the economic impact, the GVA, gross value added of the creative industries, the scale of them growing, and so on. I think, we can argue a very, very simple case about our role and our potential in economic recovery, and the cultural and artistic sector is an ecosystem. It functions as an interrelated series of interrelated units. I think if we can argue that kind of case, but we need to do it, and the same in terms of kind of our impact on society and community. And the statistics and the evidence and the research are there. There's a lot of new analysis, social value analysis in the UK taking place around the impact of arts and culture on what the economic value of a social intervention of arts and culture can be, how it compares to other kinds of interventions. And there's studies being done on this using the Treasury Green Book analysis and so on. Some of the Creative People and Places projects major in that. People in the UK will know what that is. But I think if we can argue the case about our role there, I think it's also that thing about the unique role of art and culture in kind of rebinding us together after this crisis is, after we know what the kind of long view of this crisis is going to be. But I think always we need to be sensitive, we need to be delicate, we need to make sure we're expressing things in the right way at the right moment. And that will be different in different national contexts, and I did a little bit of research on the people who were coming to my workshop group, and the national contexts are different in different countries. Ireland spelled out its roadmap out of recovery much sooner than England did. Very different situation in Hungary. Different situation in the other countries represented in my group, and I think we just need to be cognizant of that. And different countries, the populations in different countries will be ready at different times to hear from us and to hear about the role we can play. So I think it's just being kind of mindful of all that. So it's kind of no one size fits all, but know the role we play. We play a role in social, we can play a role, and we will be playing a role in social and economic reconstruction of places. The outdoor arts sector will be pulling people into places where people haven't been, and people will do other things like shopping and eating out. And, it will be, there's a role for us revitalizing communities, places, retail centers. So I think we can argue some of those things alongside other industries, which are rightly arguing their role in reopening and restarting. So that would be my answer to them.
Thank you, Michael.
I think we only have 10 minutes left now, but as we're talking about the future, I can't help but just thinking about the next generation. And I had a question for Hilary, but for all really, that we will need strong leaders in the cultural sector, and that need will not disappear, and it's even more important now than ever, really. So how do you think we can best empower and inspire the next generation of leaders in the arts?
I think empowering is probably the critical issue, and that is about creating space and about sharing space and about validating and equipping. So for me, leadership is something that you practice over time. You don't just acquire it all straight away. But if you're not given the space to trial things out, to test your ideas, to put forward suggestions, then you're not empowered to start to really hone and practice those leadership skills. So for me, the empowering element is perhaps even more critical than the inspiring element. Creating opportunities, letting the next generation step forward. I think, you know, one of the things that I think about is that we, as the current generation, we have experience, and experience is really good. It's really important part of the mix. But if you mix that experience with the innovation and the energy and the, you know, well, do it differently of the next generation, then you can have something really dynamic and powerful. But if we only sit with our experience, then we're living in the past, and we're living with what we did yesterday or the day before. And innovation doesn't lie comfortably with that. You have to work it differently. So I think creating space and allowing new voices to come in, and then combining it with experience is where we'll get the next generation of strong leaders.
Thank you, Hilary. Did anyone else want to reflect on this?
I would just add something about, if it's okay. Sorry, did you want to speak, Bettina? No, okay. I'd just add something about diversity in leadership, really. And I'm talking about diversity in a broad sense. You know, I do mean in terms of, you know, what our leaders look like and what the ethnic and makeup of our leadership is. But I'm more thinking about, you know, it was interesting, Anaïs, you used you know, we come to think of leadership as something, the primary quality is strength. And actually, is it always, you know, and Bettina talked a little bit about emotional intelligence being more important than IQ. And I kind of think we need to be on the lookout for different types of leadership. Sometimes we only hear, I'm in rooms with people all the time facilitating workshops, and very often the noisiest person sounds like the leader on the surface, but they're not always. And actually, if you look and dig more closely and listen to some of the softer voices, you can find leadership there too. It just looks different and sounds different. And I think for me, it's something about, you know, everything Hilary said, I completely agree with, creating the space and sharing space, but we kind of need to alter our filters a little bit and make sure we're looking for different qualities in leaders. And then we will get better answers and better decisions in organizations.
Bettina.
Just following on directly from that, I think if this was the era of the introverts, you know, and the era of listening, wouldn't that be great? If maybe confidence and loudness is not what we need right now. We need to just have a bit more humility. Listen to the introverts, because they will have very deep thoughts that we all need to hear.
And I think just kind of adding to everything that's been already said, I've always thought of leadership as a function, not as a person. In my organisation, the leadership passes from person to person as is needed. It's not held by one individual pushing things forwards. And I think the more we start as a community to think about leadership being an action rather than a person, the better off we will all be.
Thank you so much. I have a very quick last question for today, and I will address it to all of you, is the following. So what did you learn, or how did you find this experience of CS Lab in a short sentence? How was it for you?
I'll go first. I loved it. Adrenaline filled, really exciting. A lot of this way of working is new, so really exciting.
I've really enjoyed the opportunity to connect with people that I probably wouldn't have had the chance to connect with. Being digital has enabled that. But I do miss the bodies. I'm a physical practitioner and I'm used to working with bodies, so I'm very relational. I've missed you all being in a space with you. And I look forward to being in a space with you again in the future, but let's connect the way that we can right now.
Yeah, I think it's been fantastic. I mean, what it has done, and I didn't expect it to, it does make me feel connected. And I think it's wonderful to think there's so many different countries represented right now on my screen in my house in Brighton. So that is fantastic. And I thank XTRAX and Circostrada for making that possible. It's been wonderful to connect with Hilary and Michael and Vicky like this. It's been a great joy. And I think I'll have to do a little bit more practicing with the digital elements of it. But, you know, there's always learning to be done.
Likewise, it's been a pleasure. I haven't been able to engage as much as I would have liked, but to be interested in it, to be engaged in different conversations with different sets of people and a much wider diversity of people and more international than usual. That I think points to some of the benefits of working digitally, just in terms of the breadth and the scale at which you can reach different people. And so I think for me, the idea is how can we retain the best of this format as well as the face-to-face relational format going forwards, because there are pros and cons for both. And I think that having worked this way, that's becoming more and more apparent. There's a place for both, I think.
I would definitely agree with that. Thank you, Hilary. Well, I think it's time to say goodbye. I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of our listeners from all over the world. It's been so difficult not to see people actually physically, but we know that you're there and you've all been very busy in the chat. So thank you to all of you for taking the time to take part in this. And obviously, absolutely huge thank you to all of our speakers who have gone out of their comfort zone to do this, and I think it was new for a lot of us. So thank you so much. And I just feel like I saw the word wisdom come up quite a bit in that chat, and I certainly feel it's a lot wiser. And I want to thank you for your generosity and your time and just that wisdom. So thank you so much. Yeah, that's it from me.
And really, thank you, Hilary, Vicky, Bettina, Michael, for being so generous and caring during these 3 days. Thank you, Maggie, Irene, Anaïs, Elena, and all of the XTRAX team for being such a wonderful partner in this project. I would also like to thank my two colleagues, Laura and Laura from Circostrada Network. And a big thank you to all of the participants in these 3 days. And before we part, I would like to make two important announcements. So first of all, to provide a little bit of a connection, even though our bodies are separated right now, we would like to pull all of your beautiful faces on the screen and take a collective picture. So don't worry, you can either accept it or refuse it in case you need to put a t-shirt right now. And also, the second big announcement is that all the videos are being recorded of the keynote sessions. They will be available online next week. And we will also work on a free bilingual publication in French and in English, retracing the main points of the CS lab. And this publication will be out by the end of the summer. So I see people coming out and see faces of people I know or I don't. And it's lovely and exciting. And you can put your microphone on, we can shout, we can do whatever we want. You know, let's go wild, it's Friday.
It's so good to see faces. We can get visual feedback.
There were actually real people listening to us.
Yeah.
Real people, gosh.
Imaginary.
This wasn't just an illusion.
We're not done yet. There's just so many of them. You're working through the list.
Amen.
Wait.
Maybe we could all find a drink and do a visual cheers.
Yes,
To wrap up this
absolutely.
lab.
Let's do that.
We can say cheers in our own languages. I'll say it in Gaelic, and maybe Lucy Medlicott, if she's still there, she can say it too.
Elena, could you make me a co-organizer so I can unmute people?
Yes, absolutely. Make a host. Oh, there's only 13 left.
You can spot the people who are in the UK because there tends to be a mug with tea.
Oh yeah, always.
It's the mug, but it's not tea.
Tea. So brilliant to see you all.
Yeah, it's great. We only have a couple of people left.
Raffaella. Hello, Raffaella.
You're welcome to talk to each other as well.
Okay, done. We're all in, guys.
How do you know who else is listening? So
everybody's listening, Lucy.
If you just switch the pages, you'll see everybody's faces. Oh, it's so lovely to see you.
Stéphane, would you like to lead the cheers?
Sure. So here is my cup. I've been drinking the whole time, as you saw. It's lovely to be here with you, and I totally agree with Vicky. I can't wait to be with you in the same room, but I'm sure it's going to happen soon. Thank you so much, everyone, for this week. It's been amazing. I'm so pumped, and I know that in 5 minutes I'm going to be by myself in the living room. But now, cheers. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Food.
Cheers.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Take care, all.
Take care, all.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Oh, it's so lovely. Okay, I'm gonna end the meeting.
Oh,
No, I'm not.
Bye.
Everyone, be safe.
Oh my God.
Oh, look at all the faces. Okay.
Bravo, acting. Bravo.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, I'm gonna end it.
Bye.
Don't end it.
Never end it.